Singapore is a nation whose success demonstrates how a region with almost little natural resources can develop economic advantages with influence much beyond its immediate area. The nation that had little chance of remaining independent over the course of one generation has now become the global leader in nearly all facets of socioeconomic development. The lack of natural resources, the limited territory, the impoverished and little educated population, that was the status of Singapore when it won independence in 1965. In fact, in the 1960s, Singapore was an undeveloped country with a GDP per capita of less than US $320. But today, Singapore is a nation with banks, skyscrapers, lovely roads, and the best tax, education, and health systems in the world. Even it was placed first in the world's most competitive economies list published by IMD, overtaking the rankings of the United States and Hong Kong. And if you think about the initial situation that this small island had near the equator, their current economic situation seems like a miracle, and it is indeed unbelievable. In fact, its economic miracle has been called the 20th century's most successful development story. Now, you must be thinking, how did this small nation, with a population of only 5.8 million, manage to rise to the status of one of the richest nations on Earth and a pillar of stability in its neighborhood? What were the factors that enabled the city-state on an island in Southeast Asia transform over the course of about a generation from a developing nation to one with one of the most competitive economies? But before we begin our discussion, it is necessary to explain a little bit of the nation's history or a better understanding of the nature of the events that have taken place here. So, let's get started. The British ruled Singapore for more than a century. However, the failure of the British to defend the colony against the Japanese during World War II sparked strong anti-colonial and nationalist attitudes, which ultimately resulted in Singapore's independence. Singapore broke away from the British throne on August 31, 1963, and combined with Malaysia to form the Federation of Malaysia. As the two sides tried to merge with one another racially, Singapore's 2 years as a member of Malaysia were plagued with social unrest. Violence and street riots became all too prevalent. In Singapore, the proportion of Chinese to Malay was 3-1. The Malay leaders in Kuala Lumpur were concerned that the expanding Chinese population on the island and peninsula might endanger their cultural identity and political views. Therefore, the Malaysian parliament decided to exclude Singapore from Malaysia in order to guarantee a Malay majority within Malaysia proper and to reduce the impact of communism. And on August 9, 1965, Singapore formally attained independence, with Yusof bin Ishak as its first president and the incredibly powerful Lee Kuan Yew as its prime minister. However, Singapore's challenges persisted even after it gained independence. The 3 million inhabitants of the city-state were largely unemployed. On the outskirts of the city, slums and squatter communities were home to more than 2/3 of its inhabitants. Singapore needed appropriate water supplies, proper infrastructure, and natural resources. And the starting point of the country's development began when lawyer Lee Kuan Yew came to power. From that point on, the nation was able to pass through the third world countries category and into the developed ones because to the exceptional leadership of that man. So, the role of Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's first prime minister who was in office from 1959 to 1990, the longest-serving prime minister in the history. Much of the Singapore's success can be attributed to his vision. In fact, during his tenure, the country's per capita GDP increased from $400 to $12,200 over the course of that quarter century. So, there are a number of policies and decisions that made such a fantastic transformation possible. Let's have a look at them. 1. Globalizing industry and trade. Singapore's economy during colonial times was based mostly on trade and investment. However, throughout the post-colonial era, there were few opportunities for job growth due to this economic activity. The British military departure made the unemployment problem worse. The leaders of Singapore started experimenting with globalization under pressure to provide employment for their people. Influenced by Israel's ability to leap over its Arab neighbors and trade with Europe and America, Lee and his colleagues knew they had to connect with the developed world and convince multinational corporations to manufacture in Singapore. 2. Stabilization of government and law. Lee Kuan Yew believed, with good reason, that democracy under conditions of poverty would result in even more turmoil. Lee thereby established order while keeping market linkages in the economy itself. He did this by restricting free speech, outlawing rallies, and censoring personal votes, among other sometimes brutal measures. Lee's People Action Party, PAP, suppressed all autonomous labor unions and combined those that persisted into a single under Lee's direct supervision. Moreover, people who posed a threat to racial, political, or corporate unity were swiftly imprisoned without minimal due process. Additionally, he began a campaign against corruption by streamlining the decision-making process and eliminating all legal ambiguities. 3. Creating a market economy. Singapore adopted international markets, sought out multinational corporations to promote industrial expansion, and moved away from import substitution in favor of export-led industrialization, which was against the grain of the time. International investors were drawn in by the nation's strict but business-friendly rules. Singapore was highly stable compared to its neighbors, whose political and economic environments were unstable. Furthermore, Singapore was a great location for manufacturing due to its advantageous location and well-developed port system. 4. Creating a banking system. The Singapore economic miracle cannot be imagined without integration into the world banking system. The country got the status of the financial center for the fact that it made possible a 24-hour banking service. Currently, Singapore's banking industry controls this market niche. Given that Singapore has put in place policies that improve bank account secrecy, and this move could result in an additional influx of foreign investment. So, Lee Kuan Yew's emphasis on growth, the drive to make Singapore an appealing investment destination, as well as the focus on attracting top-tier talent, the construction of cutting-edge infrastructure and excellent air and sea links, a low and transparent tax regime, a clean and efficient bureaucracy, a strong regulatory and legal framework, a neutral diplomatic policy that has ensured Singapore's miraculous success. And that is the true spell of magic that relies behind its success. But, additionally, there are several other factors that supported Singapore's rapid development. So, let's talk about them. Singapore's geography and history are significant factors, of course. The founders of modern Singapore were skilled at efficiently utilizing their geographic and historical heritage. Singapore is a commerce and logistical powerhouse that is well situated in the midst of Southeast Asia. For instance, container ships from the Middle East must travel the shortest distance across the Malacca Strait if oil is supplied to East Asian nations like Japan and South Korea. Furthermore, they are unable to complete the entire route without refueling. Singapore is thus in a good position to serve as a trade center for container ships. So, Singapore is good for business that ships sail there. Singapore's port has surpassed Rotterdam and Hong Kong to become the busiest transshipment port in the world. It has even surpassed the port of Shanghai to become the second busiest port in the world in terms of total cargo tonnage handled. Additionally, Singapore's tourism industry is also thriving, attracting over 10 million visitors annually. The city-state now has a zoo, a night safari, and a nature reserve. The country has opened two of the world's most expensive integrated casino resorts in the Marina Bay Sands and the Resorts World Sentosa. And then there's the factor that has been neglected so far while talking about Singapore's success, and that is education. A new educational system was adopted in January 1979 in order to lower the dropout rate, increase quality, and develop the more technically competent labor force required to meet the new economic goals. Singapore abandoned its previous one-size-fits-all approach to education that would provide students with numerous pathways. But obviously, this would not have been possible without a strong administration, a strong, law enforcement-focused administration that can provide safety. And Singapore's legal system is clear, safe, and efficient, which contributes to its stability. In terms of law, this indicates that the outcomes associated with the laws are plain and predictable for everyone, that the laws do not change frequently but rather consistently, and that they are consistently enforced, efficient. These three essential components produce the stability needed to draw in investors. Indeed, risk aversion is inherently a trait of investors. They dislike it when the rules of the game are murky, flexible, and applied at the arbitrariness of a single person. Therefore, they very much like Singapore. So, all these factors in combination have led to the emergence of Singapore as a powerful and wealthy financial center and make it a quite special place to live. Now, what does Singapore's future hold with such high praises? Well, It's believed that Singapore will keep transforming its economy toward higher value-added sectors with robust productivity development in order to maintain rising salaries and raising living standards. Singapore's position as one of the top financial centers in the world, its competitiveness as a logistics, shipping, and aviation hub, and its function as a regional headquarters for large multinational corporations will be key growth drivers for Singapore during the next 10 years. And the long-term outlook for Singapore remains very bright. So, what is your opinion? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll be happy to hear from you. And make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button as well. Thank you for watching.